Welcome back, welcome back. He's done it all. Fiction, documentaries, theatre, screenwriting, acting. He's filmed in all the continents of the world, including Antarctica. His films often feature heroes with impossible dreams, people with unique talents in obscure fields, or individuals who find themselves in conflict with nature. He is Werner Herzog, and he joins me now to tell us more about his life and times. Werner, welcome. I hope that there won't be a repeat in this interview of what happened in your BBC interview in Los Angeles a few years back.
Yeah, that was a bizarre incident. I was actually shot.
During an interview?
Nobody would believe it, but it was actually caught on tape. And it was, in fact, as I said immediately, an insignificant bullet. I was actually shot at much more seriously before in my life, but this hit me here right under the belt.
Not too much below the belt.
No. And I wanted to continue, although I was bleeding, I wanted to continue my sentence at least, and but the cameraman had already hit the ground and the sound man had fled. But we continued the interview then later at my home. So
and indoors, rather.
Indoors, but these things happen. I mean, so
but
what?
Did they ever find out who did it? Whether it was deliberate or an accident?
It was certainly deliberate. There was a man shouting and raving and ranting. It was a little bit like road rage, shouting against all these movie stars all the time here in Hollywood, and so. No, there was not much afterwards.
Well, you mentioned you had been shot at before that.
Yes, more seriously, for example, I did a film on child soldiers in Nicaragua, and I was crossing Rio Coco, which is the border river between Honduras and Nicaragua. And we were shot at when we were in the middle of the river, and that was with assault rifles. And it's unpleasant because you are so openly visible in a small boat in the middle of a river. You can't take cover.
Right. And so that was
more serious. Yeah.
More serious. Yeah. Yes. And the well, I think we're all right in here. I think we're safe here. Yes, I think you can relax.
Safe.
You can I was saying you've done it all, and what word do you put on your passport? Does it say producer, writer, director? What's profession? Does it still say profession?
The strange thing is that I never considered that I had a profession at all, because directing films, in my opinion, is not really a profession for me. It's like there's no distinction between life and profession for me anymore. So I'm just slaloming through life somehow and try not to hit the concrete wall at 180 miles an hour. That has been my task mostly, but profession, I don't know whether I have one.
How many films have you directed?
I haven't really counted them, but recently there was a big retrospective at the Centre Pompidou in Paris, and they showed 56 of my films. There's a few more, but maybe 60, because I have done 3 more films since then, and they are not counted. It must be around 60.
And you've got 2 to come out. You were honoured at the Venice Film Festival having 2 films in competition, which is unheard of, isn't it? And one of them with the memorable title, My Son, What Have Ye Done?
Yes.
Is that deliberately biblical?
Yes. It is deliberately chosen to be very biblical because it is a film about a bizarre murder case, actually based on a real case in San Diego some 2-3 decades back. And it was connected to the staging of the Oresteia, an ancient Greek tragedy. And of course, very elevated language plays a huge part in the film. And the actor who has to actually murder his mother in the play became more and more erratic and dangerous.
We've got Fitzcarraldo here, it sounds like somebody's name, but he's not going to walk in now. That's the film title, which a lot of people think of as one of your greatest films. I don't know whether you do you?
Yes, it's probably one of the real toughest achievements that I have had in my life, because you see, moving a steamship over a mountain is not a joke. It was over 300 tons. And
How did you do that, actually?
It was basically done with Stone Age technology, primitive winches, primitive pulley systems, lots of cables, and about 1,000 native Indians.
That was a phenomenon.
Moving winches and things like that, yeah.
Yes. So was it costly or just almost impossible?
Well, you cannot
more
count,
difficult than costly.
You cannot count.
We're seeing
like
some of
this
it on the
in
screen
terms, now. Yeah, you cannot count in terms of cash money, because you cannot move a mountain with money. You can only move it with faith. And of course, we had a lot of problems. In pre-production, I ran into a border war between Peru and Ecuador, and I had built a camp for 1,100 people in the middle of the jungle, so in the middle of nowhere, which was close to the Ecuadorian border, and my camp was attacked and burned to the ground.
My
we
God,
had two plane crashes, and you just name it, yeah.
Oh, that's incredible, that list of misfortunes along the way,
Yeah.
which you overcame. But did you sometimes feel, when another thing happened, did you sometimes feel jinxed?
Yes, in a way I had the feeling as if there was a curse weighing on this whole project, because there was not one day without a catastrophe. So, and to hang on in for a long time was quite difficult.
Positively character forming, I would think. Yeah.
In a way, yes.
So what's coming up in the future? You're hoping to do a film about Gertrude Bell?
Yes,
Who was
which
this?
might, yes, she was some sort of an equivalent to Lawrence of Arabia.
Florence of Arabia.
Yeah, yes. And she started out in the Mid-East in Iraq as an archaeologist, as a very young woman, just having finished Oxford University, which was very unusual at that time for a young woman to attend Oxford. And she had studied history and started to work as an archaeologist. And then later, as she was very, very close to the spirit of the Arab world, and she was very, very highly respected. And until today, I think she's very, very highly respected. She became more and more politically influential and was one of the persons probably the most intimately connected to the delineation of the countries Iraq, Jordania, Syria, and it's a very fascinating story. And quite soon I'll be in Syria and Jordania for that.
A giant figure in the history of Iraq and so on. And well, I mean, in fact, it's amazing with all these films we've talked about and so on. And yet, I gather that you grew up without a television set, and you made your first phone call at the age of 17, is that right?
That is correct, yeah. It may sound strange, and I had no idea that cinema even existed until I was 11 years old. I hadn't seen films, but I did not even know that it existed until a traveling projectionist showed up in this tiny little village in the mountains where I grew up. My mother actually had fled with my brothers from Munich, which was bombarded at that time in the Second World War, towards the end of the Second World War. And so I grew up in complete seclusion, and I had no idea what the world out there was. And I, as you mentioned, made my first phone call when I was 17, but I made my first film when I was 19.
That's fantastic. What do you feel now about German reunification, by the way? I mean, after 8 days after it, you said it was all great on the first day, but within 8 days, the sort of complaint syndrome set in.
Yes, sure. It was very sad to observe for me that a culture, what I call a culture of complaint, set in. Germans have this kind of attitude to complain all the time and wait for the government to do something for them. And I'm quite different. I roll up my sleeves and I start to tackle whatever is thrown at me. But for me it was important to see it because in the early 80s, Willy Brandt, the German chancellor, whom I really liked a lot, declared in a declaration at the Bundestag, at Parliament, that the book of the German unification was closed. And he wanted to, in small steps, have an approaching East Germany, and I thought this was not possible for a German chancellor to say that. And I set out walking across Germany on foot, always following the borderline. I walked literally along the border in the mountains in Bavaria, the border between Austria and Germany, then along the Swiss-German border, France, and I walked about 1,800 kilometers until I never finished this circling around Germany because I fell ill and had to go to hospital for a week. But I set out because I said it's only the poets now who will hold this country together. If politics abandons us, abandons this necessity of reunification, which is as necessary as, for example, Ireland. Ireland will and has to be reunited one day. Korea will be reunited one day, and we cannot abandon these quests. So for me it was very important and at the same time disappointing to see the amount of complaint that came out of Germans. Now we are reunified and where is the government to help us along?
So that was where that thought came from. Well, I must say that you've done all these films, but after hearing all of this, I would be very interested to see a film of your life too. Thank you very much for being with us. Werner Herzog there, ladies and gentlemen. And now we switch to, well, we were talking about Ireland just then. As Ireland goes to the polls in a referendum on Europe today, we'll be debating the issues after this break.